What would you do if the woman you planned to marry suddenly insulted the one person who raised you, loved you, and stood beside you when everyone else walked away? Daniel Carter was a billionaire with everything money could buy, but when he brought his beautiful fiancée, Victoria, home to meet his beloved grandmother, he never imagined those few minutes would change his entire life. And then his grandmother looked at him, pointed toward the humble maid standing nearby, and said 6 shocking words, "You'd better marry the maid." Before we begin, if you enjoy emotional stories about kindness, second chances, and the power of treating people with respect, please subscribe to Kindness Miracles, like this video, and comment below where you're watching from. Daniel Carter lived in a magnificent mansion outside Boston, Massachusetts. At 38, he had built a technology company worth billions of dollars. Newspapers called him a genius, investors called him fearless, and strangers often assumed his life was perfect. But Daniel had never forgotten where he came from. His mother had raised him alone after his father left when Daniel was only 8. His grandmother, Eleanor, had been the steady heart of their family. She had worked long hours, saved every dollar she could, and made sure Daniel always had a warm meal and someone to talk to. Now Eleanor was 84 and used a wheelchair, but her sharp mind and gentle heart were still strong. Daniel visited her every evening, no matter how busy he was. One Friday afternoon, Daniel arrived home with his fiancée, Victoria. Victoria was elegant, wealthy, and beautiful. She wore an expensive green dress and carried herself like someone who expected every room to notice her. Daniel was deeply in love with her, or at least he believed he was. "Grandma, I want you to meet someone very special," Daniel said as he entered Eleanor's sitting room. Eleanor smiled warmly. "So this is Victoria." Victoria stepped forward, kissed the air near Eleanor's cheek, and smiled politely. "It's lovely to finally meet you." Eleanor reached for her hand. "I've heard so much about you." "Daniel seems very happy." "He should be," Victoria replied with a small laugh. "We're getting married soon." Eleanor smiled. "That is wonderful news." Just then, a maid entered the room carrying a tray of tea. Her name was Grace. She was a quiet woman in her early 30s who had worked at the mansion for nearly 2 years. Grace had grown up in a small town in Ohio and had moved to Boston after losing her parents. She worked hard, never complained, and treated Eleanor with extraordinary kindness. She remembered Eleanor's medicine schedule, brushed her hair when her hands were tired, read books to her at night, and sometimes stayed after her shift simply because she knew Eleanor did not like being alone. Grace placed the tea on the table. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Carter." Eleanor smiled. "Thank you, Grace. You always know exactly what I need." Victoria watched the exchange with a strange expression. "Is she always this involved with your grandmother?" she asked. Daniel nodded. "Grace takes excellent care of Grandma." Victoria looked Grace up and down. "Well, I suppose that's what she's paid to do." The room became quiet. Grace lowered her eyes and stepped back. Daniel frowned. "Victoria." "What?" she asked. "I didn't say anything wrong." Eleanor slowly turned her wheelchair toward Victoria. "Actually, you did." Victoria looked surprised. Eleanor continued. "Grace is paid to work here, but kindness isn't something you can put on a paycheck." Grace's eyes filled with tears, but she remained silent. Daniel looked at his grandmother, then at Grace. He suddenly remembered all the times Grace had helped Eleanor when he was traveling. She had never asked for praise. She had simply cared. Later that evening, dinner was served in the mansion's grand dining room. Victoria spent most of the meal talking about the wedding, the guest list, the flowers, and the luxury venue she wanted. Daniel listened quietly. Then Victoria said, "After the wedding, I think we should replace some of the household staff. I don't want people like that wandering around during family events." Daniel froze. "People like what?" Victoria shrugged. Staff. Servants. They don't belong at important family gatherings. Grace happened to be standing near the doorway. She heard every word. She quietly walked away. Daniel pushed his chair back. Excuse me. He found Grace in the kitchen, wiping tears from her face. I'm sorry, he said. Grace shook her head. You don't have to apologize for her. Daniel looked at her. Yes, I do. I should have stopped it sooner. Grace smiled sadly. Mr. Carter, you've always treated me with respect. That's enough. Daniel felt something shift inside him. For years, he had been surrounded by people who wanted something from him. Grace was different. She cared about his grandmother when no cameras were watching, when no money was being offered, and when nobody was there to praise her. The next morning, Daniel brought Victoria to Eleanor's room. Eleanor looked at both of them for a long moment. Then she said, Daniel, I need to tell you something. Victoria smiled confidently. Of course. Eleanor pointed gently toward Grace, who was arranging flowers by the window. You'd better marry the maid. Daniel stared at her. Victoria gasped. Grace nearly dropped the flowers. Eleanor continued, not because she is a maid. Because she has shown you what real love looks like. Victoria